In 1857, a miner named Patrick Doyle descended into the Harrow Creek Gold Mine in regional Victoria, Australia, with 17 other men. Only Patrick Doyle came back out. He never spoke about what happened underground, not once, not ever, not in the 43 years he lived after that day. But on the night he died, February 3, 1900, his granddaughter, who was sitting beside his bed, reported that he gripped her wrist with a strength that left bruises, pulled her close, and whispered 4 words into her ear. She never repeated those words to anyone, but she wrote them down and sealed the paper inside a Bible. And the Bible eventually made its way, as things do in old families, in old countries, to a museum archive in Ballarat, Victoria, where in 2019, a researcher named Dr. Amelia Cross opened it. This is the story of the Harrow Creek Gold Mine and what still lives inside it. The year is 1857. The Victorian gold rush is 6 years old and already beginning to fade at the edges. The easy alluvial gold, the gold that glittered in creek beds and rewarded the patient man with a pan, has largely been found. What remains is the deep gold, the gold buried in reef formations hundreds of feet underground, locked in quartz and granite, accessible only to those willing to go down into the dark with a pickaxe and a lamp, and the particular brand of desperate courage that the goldfields attracted. The Harrow Creek area, 60 kilometers northwest of Ballarat, had a reputation even then. The Dja Dja Wurrung people, the traditional custodians of that land, had a name for the hill above Harrow Creek that European settlers mangled into Wirra Wirra Hill. The correct name in the Dja Dja Wurrung language meant something closer to the hill that breathes in. No European settler asked what that meant. In retrospect, they should have. The Harrow Creek Mining Company was established in March 1857 by a consortium of 7 investors based in Melbourne. They hired 18 men, experienced hard rock miners, most of them Irish and Cornish immigrants who had followed gold from one end of the world to the other. They brought equipment, they sank a shaft, they went down. The foreman's name was Robert Crane. His daily log, recovered from the Ballarat Museum archive, documented the first 3 weeks of operations in meticulous detail. Depth of shaft, amount of ore extracted, condition of the timber supports, weather above ground. And then, on the 22nd day, a single entry that stands apart from all the others. It reads, "Something is wrong with the air at depth. The men are hearing things. I hear them too. I have ordered double lamp rations. We will continue." 3 days after that final entry, Patrick Doyle climbed out of the shaft, alone, and walked 6 kilometers to the nearest settlement. He was found sitting outside the general store at dawn, covered in rock dust and something dark that the storekeeper assumed was mud, but later described, in a signed statement taken by the local constabulary, as having smelled sweet and wrong, like nothing that comes from the earth. The constable and 2 volunteers descended into the shaft that afternoon. They found no bodies. They found no equipment. They found nothing. The shaft was empty. The tunnels were empty. 17 men and all their tools had simply ceased to be. The official inquiry concluded, cause of disappearance unknown, possible tunnel collapse with subsequent decomposition of organic material, mine declared unsafe and sealed. The mine was sealed, but sealed is not the same as closed, and closed is not the same as empty. The Harrow Creek Gold Mine was officially sealed in 1857. The sealing consisted of a timber frame over the shaft entrance, reinforced with iron bolts, and a corrugated iron cover weighted with stones. It was not enough. In 1871, 14 years after the disappearance, 3 teenage boys from the nearby settlement of Denali went to the sealed mine on a dare. 2 returned. The third, a 15-year-old named George Sims, was found 3 days later, seated at the mine entrance, facing the sealed shaft, unresponsive. He was taken to Melbourne for medical evaluation. He never spoke again. He lived until 1934 in a care facility outside Geelong, sitting always facing the same direction, south, toward Harrow Creek. 1903, a geologist named Frederick Ashe conducted an independent survey of the Harrow Creek area. His report, filed with the Victorian Department of Mines, is largely technical: soil composition, geological strata, estimated gold reserves at depth. But in the appendix, in handwriting that grows increasingly erratic across 4 pages, he describes something he encountered at the sealed mine entrance during an evening survey. He describes the ground vibrating, not from any seismic activity, too localized, too rhythmic. He describes it as feeling like a pulse, like something very large, very deep, breathing slowly. He describes looking at the sealed mine entrance and seeing, his word, shadows moving inside the iron cover, as if the dark beneath it was alive and arranging itself. The appendix ends mid-sentence. Frederick Ashe returned to Melbourne. He resigned from the Department of Mines in 1904. He never conducted another geological survey. 1948, a group of amateur prospectors, 3 men, all veterans of the Second World War, men who had seen genuine horror and were therefore perhaps less cautious than they should have been about lesser horrors, forced open the sealed mine entrance and descended into the shaft. 2 emerged within the hour, visibly shaken, refusing to speak about what they had seen. The third, a man named Dennis Hargreaves, former sergeant, decorated at Tobruk, did not emerge. Search parties descended over the following 3 days. The shaft had been significantly extended since 1857. The tunnels ran deeper and further than the original plans indicated, as if the mine had somehow continued to grow in the 91 years since it was sealed. Dennis Hargreaves was never found.
1979. 2 university students studying Australian folklore, a young woman named Catherine Bell and her research partner James Okafor, visited the Harrow Creek site as part of a thesis on persistent site-specific paranormal traditions in rural Victoria. Catherine Bell's thesis was eventually published in 1983. It contained 40 pages of research on the Harrow Creek Mine, interviews with local residents, historical records, analysis of the Jaja Wurrung oral traditions regarding Wira Wira Hill. The thesis was thorough. It was well-researched. It was the most comprehensive academic treatment of the Harrow Creek Mine ever produced. It also contained a 41st page, added by hand, not typed, that her academic supervisor later stated she had never seen before the thesis was bound. The handwritten page read, "We went down. James wanted to go further. I pulled him back. He was not angry. He was not anything. His eyes were wrong. I got him out. I do not know what I got out with me. His hands are cold. He keeps looking south. Please do not go to Harrow Creek. Please do not go down." James Okafor recovered eventually. It took 3 years. He never discussed what he had seen or experienced in the mine, but he changed his research focus entirely, from Australian folklore to medieval European agricultural practices, as far from Harrow Creek as an academic career could take him. In 2001, the site was surveyed by the Victorian Heritage Register and classified as historically significant, access restricted. A new concrete cap was placed over the shaft entrance. Warning signs were installed. And still, people went. Dr. Amelia Cross was 41 years old in 2019, and she had spent 16 years as a historian specializing in Victorian-era Australian mining history. She was methodical, skeptical, and deeply empirical, the kind of researcher who trusts primary sources above all else and applies the same rigorous analysis to a ghost story as to a mining company ledger. She did not believe in the paranormal. She believed in documentation.
The Bible had been donated to the Ballarat Museum's archive in 1987 by the estate of a woman named Edith Doyle Carmichael, the granddaughter of Patrick Doyle, the sole survivor of the 1857 disappearance. It had sat in the archive for 32 years, catalogued as Personal Effects, Doyle Family, circa 1900, unexamined by anyone with sufficient context to understand its significance. Dr. Cross found it while cross-referencing estate records related to early mining families. She opened the Bible. She found the folded paper between the pages of the Book of Job, which she noted in her research journal with the dry observation, "Appropriate placement." She unfolded the paper. The paper is approximately 12 by 8 centimeters. The handwriting is consistent with a female hand, late Victorian period, educated. The ink is iron gall, significantly faded. The text reads, 4 words, "It is still hungry." Those were Patrick Doyle's last words, after 43 years of silence. It is still hungry. Dr. Cross spent 4 months in the archive after that, pulling every document related to the Harrow Creek Mine, the foreman's log, the constabulary report, Frederick Ash's geological survey, Catherine Bell's thesis, including the handwritten 41st page. She built a timeline. 1857, 17 men gone. 1871, George Sims never spoke again. 1903, Frederick Ash saw the shadows moving. 1948, Dennis Hargreaves never found. 1979, James Okafor, 3 years to recover. And dozens of smaller incidents in between, local reports of sounds from the sealed mine, animals refusing to approach the hill, a farmhand in 1923 who reported seeing lights moving deep underground and was dismissed as drunk, a family in 1961 whose dog ran to the mine entrance every night for a week, barking at the concrete cap, and then one morning simply lay down beside it and refused to move, and died there 3 days later for no veterinary reason anyone could determine. Dr. Cross was a skeptic and an empiricist, but she was also a historian who understood that when a pattern repeats across 160 years, across dozens of independent witnesses with no connection to each other, across multiple forms of documentation, it stops being anecdote. It becomes evidence. She applied for a research permit to access the sealed mine site. It was granted. She should not have gone alone.
October 14, 2019. Dr. Amelia Cross arrived at the Harrow Creek site at 9:47 in the morning. She had a research permit, a geological survey lamp, a voice recorder, a digital camera, and a notebook. She had informed the Victorian Heritage Council of her visit. She had left her itinerary with a colleague at the University of Ballarat. She was prepared. The first thing she noted in her voice recorder, standing 20 meters from the mine entrance, was the silence. "No birds," she recorded. "Significant. The surrounding bush has substantial bird activity. I could hear kookaburras and currawongs clearly until approximately 50 meters from the site. Within this radius, nothing, not even insects. The acoustic environment is unusual. There is a low-frequency sound I cannot identify, possibly geological, possibly equipment from a distant farm, but it feels," she paused,
It feels like it's coming from below. The concrete cap over the shaft entrance had been partially displaced, not broken, moved aside, as if from below, with a precise, deliberate force. Dr. Cross photographed this carefully. She noted in her recorder that the displacement was inconsistent with any natural process. No tree root growth, no soil subsidence, no evidence of human tampering from above. The shaft was open. The original timber ladder, somehow still intact after 160 years, descended into the darkness below. Dr. Cross tested the first 3 rungs. They held. She went down. Her voice recorder captured what followed. The transcript of that recording, which Dr. Cross later submitted as part of a formal report to the Victorian Heritage Council, reads as follows. Depth approximately 8 meters. The shaft is well preserved. The timber supports are intact, which is extraordinary for the age. The walls show significant geological interest. I can see quartz reef formations that would have been highly productive. The temperature has dropped considerably, estimating 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. There is a smell. I don't have a reference for it. Not decay, not mineral. Something organic and sweet, faintly sweet. I can see the tunnel junction from the base of the shaft. There appeared to be 3 lateral tunnels branching from the main shaft. The original plans indicated 2. The third tunnel is newer, significantly newer. The rock shows recent cut marks. Someone has been extending this mine, underground, from inside. I need to describe this carefully. On the walls of the main shaft, at the base, marks, not tool marks, not geological formations, marks made deliberately. I'm going to say by a human hand, though the spacing is wrong for a human hand, too wide. The marks they form patterns, repeating patterns. I'm photographing these now. Then Dr. Cross's voice, very quietly. There is something at the entrance to the third tunnel. The audio recording continues for 11 more minutes after Dr. Cross's final spoken observation. For the first 4 of those minutes, silence, broken only by the hum and the static. Then, at the 4-minute and 18-second mark, sounds. The audio analysts who later examined the recording were able, using enhancement software, to isolate 17 distinct voice signatures from the background noise of those final 11 minutes. 17. The same number of men who disappeared in 1857. The voices were speaking names, each voice repeating its own name over and over, in the way that someone lost in the dark might repeat something familiar to hold on to their sense of self. The analysts were able to isolate and identify 5 of the 17 names with sufficient clarity for transcription. They were Doyle, Crane, Murphy, Walsh, Brennan. Cross-referenced with the 1857 Harrow Creek Mining Company employment records, also held in the Ballarat archive, all 5 names appear. 5 of the 18 men who went down in 1857. At the 9-minute and 40-second mark, Dr. Cross's voice returns to the recording. She says calmly, clearly, in the voice of someone who has made a professional decision under extreme conditions. I am going to climb out now. I am going to climb out, and I am not going to look at the third tunnel again. I am going to focus on the ladder and the light above, and I am going to climb. Whatever is at the entrance to the third tunnel, I am choosing not to see it anymore. I am choosing not to know. It is not following me, she says, halfway up. Her voice is controlled, careful. I want to note that, for the record, it is not following. It is staying. It is staying where it is. Then, just before she reaches the top, it is hungry, she says. That's what Doyle said. After 43 years, that's what it still is. It is hungry, and it has been alone, and those are two different problems, and I don't know which one is worse. Dr. Amelia Cross filed her report with the Victorian Heritage Council in November 2019. The report was thorough, documented, and deeply unsettling to the officials who received it. The council's response was swift. The Harrow Creek site was immediately resealed, this time with a reinforced steel cap bolted directly into the surrounding rock. The site was fenced with a 2-meter security fence. Warning signs were upgraded. The area was classified as restricted access geological hazard. No mention of the voice recording. No mention of the 17 voice signatures. No mention of the third tunnel, the tunnel that had not been there in 1857, that had been cut from inside the mountain in the 162 years since the mine was sealed. Dr. Cross published a version of her findings in the Journal of Australian Historical Studies in 2020. The paranormal elements of her report were edited out by the journal's peer reviewers. What remained was a dry account of anomalous acoustic phenomena at historical mining sites that tells almost nothing of what she actually experienced. She gave one interview to a small independent podcast focused on Australian historical mysteries, in which she said the following, and I want you to hear this carefully. "Whatever is in that mine has been there since before the mine existed. The miners in 1857 didn't create it, they found it. And when they found it, it found them. I think it's been alone for a very long time. I think it calls to people, not deliberately, not intelligently in any way we would recognize, but the way a deep current calls. You feel it before you understand it, and by the time you understand it, you're already being pulled." A long silence. The 17 men in 1857, I don't think they died. I think they're still down there. I think they're what I heard on the recording, and I think they've been saying their names for 160 years, because that's the only thing they have left of themselves. The interviewer asked her, "Are you afraid to go back?" Dr. Cross was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm afraid of how much I want to." The Harrow Creek Gold Mine remains sealed and fenced as of today. The steel cap, installed in 2019, has been checked twice since then in routine heritage inspections. Both times, inspectors noted that the bolts on the south side of the cap, the side facing deepest into the mountain, showed signs of stress inconsistent with any surface-level force. As if pressure were being applied from below, slowly, consistently, patiently. A pause. Patrick Doyle's last words, sealed in a Bible for over 100 years, whispered by a dying man to his granddaughter in the small hours of February 3rd, 1900. It is still hungry. Whatever found the miners of Harrow Creek in 1857, whatever pulled them down into the dark and kept them there, kept their voices but lost their bodies, kept their names but took everything else, it has been waiting in that mountain for longer than European settlement has existed in Australia. It was waiting before the gold rush, before the colony, before the first ship from England crossed the ocean. The Jaja Wurrung knew it was there. They called the hill the place that breathes in. They did not go there. They did not send their young men to test their courage against it. They simply knew and kept their distance and remembered. we do not always have the wisdom to remember. Thank you for spending this time with us on the haunted territory. Today's story is based on documented historical records from the Ballarat Museum Archive, the Victorian Heritage Council files, and the published research of Dr. Amelia Cross. Though certain details have been reconstructed from incomplete records, and the full truth of what lives beneath Wirra Wirra Hill remains, as it has always been, underground. If this story reached into something dark in you tonight, good. That means you were paying attention. Subscribe to the Haunted Territory so you never miss an investigation. Hit the bell. Leave a comment. Tell us, if you had Dr. Cross's research permit, would you go down? Would you descend into that shaft, knowing what you know? Think carefully before you answer. And whatever you do, if you ever find yourself in regional Victoria, 60 kilometers northwest of Ballarat, on a hill where the birds have stopped singing, don't go down.